All right, so in the last video, we jumped into some problems and we did something called a monohybrid cross. And in that scenario, we're looking at a cross between two individuals and we're looking at one single trait. Now, the other thing I mentioned in that video, but I didn't talk a lot about, is this idea of complete dominance. Now, in order for dominance to exist, one allele has to be dominant over another allele. So, for example, in tall versus short, big tall is dominant to short. So, in a heterozygous genotype, big T, little t, it would still be tall. Now, here's the thing. That exists in a lot of traits, but there are also a lot of traits where that doesn't exist, where there's not just two options. There's actually going to be a third middle option, and that is called incomplete dominance. So complete dominance means that the dominant allele is completely dominant to the recessive allele, and it completely overpowers it, so the recessive allele cannot demonstrate itself unless it is a homozygous recessive genotype. So in the case of big T, it would have to be little t, little t. Now, incomplete dominance means that the big T is not completely dominant over the little t. So we're no longer going to be using big and little letters in an incomplete dominance scenario. Let's give you an example. Let's say I had a red flower and a white flower, and they mated with each other. Now, everything we've been talking about at this point is there'd be two options, right? You would have a red or a white flower as the offspring. If red is dominant to white, well, then red would be more commonly passed on. Well, what about those scenarios where a red flower and a white flower can give you a pink flower? And that does exist in nature. So that is called an incomplete dominance problem. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, how the heck do I know what type of problem it is? Well, the question would have to tell you that. So I'm going to go over a couple new types of problems today. And in those problems, they're going to be incomplete dominance. And then we're going to talk about something else called codominance. And they're very similar in how they work. They just give you a different result. So, incomplete dominance. In that scenario, one allele is not completely dominant over the other. And when you have, the scenario of a heterozygous genotype, that is not going to give you the dominant trait anymore. There is no dominant trait. Neither one is dominant. There's going to be a third option, a middle option, that is somewhere in between the other two. And in these scenarios, we're going to use the capital letters. So instead of having it be one letter, type of letter like big T versus little t, now we're going to have two letters, and the possibilities could be whatever you want them to be. So if you look down here, the example I have are going to be red is going to be RR, big R, big R. White is going to be big W, and then the third option is now going to be the heterozygous version of the other two genotypes. So in this case, it's going to be RW, and that is going to be pink. So we're no longer going to have red or white. It's now going to be red, white, or pink, which is the third option. And that is called incomplete dominance. Neither one is dominant over the other. So how do we do these problems? Well, I'm going to give you an example of how that is done. So here's the example problem here, which you have in your notes. I'm going to actually bring up my little pad here that I can use so I can do the problem with you. So I hope that you guys are following along with me here, and I hope that you have some scrap paper near you. So maybe try to do this with me and then see if you get the same answer. So here's the question. Here's the problem. In snapdragons, which is a type of flower, the combination of a red flowered plant and a white flowered plant can actually produce a pink flowered plant. So it tells you the three genotypes here. So it gives you that. Big R is going to be red. Big W is going to be white, and then big W is going to be pink. So here's what the question is asking. What would be the possible phenotypes of the offspring if a red flower were crossed with a pink flower? So a red flower, I'm going to come grab my R's over here. So one parent is going to be red, so big R. And then the other parent is going to be pink. So there's no P here. What pink would be big R, big W. Now, if it said the flower was white, it would be big W. So now I want to know what is going to be the offspring, the phenotypes of the offspring, if I cross these two together. So we're going to do it exactly the same way we did the monohybrid crosses or the complete dominance crosses, except the difference now is there is a third option for our genotype. So we're going to put one parent here, the red parent on the top. We're going to put the pink parent on the side, and we're going to fill in our Punnett square. So we're going to have our big R here from this one. We're going to have our big R here from this one. Here we're going to have our big R here and our big R here. And then we're going to go with this side here. We have our, oops, big R there. Oh, didn't make enough R's. You get to see how I do this now. Ooh, isn't that fancy? All right, put another R here. And then finally, we have our W's. And oh, we're going to keep everything the same here, so I'm going to actually reverse those. Now, I'm glad I made that mistake because I wanted to bring this up. How do you know which one to put first? If there's no uppercase, before it was the uppercase goes first. That was easy to remember because uppercase and lowercase look very different. How do I know which order to put them in here? Would it have mattered if I put it as WR? Well, in actuality, theoretically, it wouldn't matter because it's a combination of the two. But now it's a mess. Now it's very confusing because we have a bunch of other, now we have a new thing here that doesn't make any sense. So by keeping them in the correct order like I have here, it just makes everything easier to follow. How do you know which one to put first? The general rule that I have always followed is that whatever it gives you first in the question. So for example, red is first. Neither one's dominant to the other, so we can't use that as our way to determine anymore. Now it's got to just be based off of the question. So in this question, it gave you red first, so that's why the R is first. If it gave you white first, pink, and then red, you would do it the other way. So just look at the question and go with it. Okay, so now what I want to know is what are my genotypic and phenotypic ratios? Now that's not what the question asks, but it's always good to do this. Now you'll notice the genotypic and phenotypic ratio is a little different now. Now we have, for our genotypic ratio, we still have three options. Big R. Instead of it being, the big little, now it's just RW, red, white, and then WW. So let's fill this in. Our genotypic ratio. Big R, we have 1, 2. So we're going to put a 2. Big R, big W, or pink, we're going to put 2. And then for WW, we have 0 because there's none there. So it's a 2 to 2 to 0 ratio. Now for the phenotypic ratio, this is what's different about the incomplete dominance problems. In incomplete dominance, we have three options for our phenotypic ratio. Before, it was just dominant versus recessive. Now we have three options. So how many of them are red? It's going to be 2 because it's RR. How many of them are pink? It's going to be 2, which is RW. And then finally, how many of them are white? It would be 0. So the answer to this question is, what would be the phenotypes of the offspring if the red flowers were crossed with a pink flower? The phenotype would be a 2 to 2 to 0 ratio, red to pink to white. So that's our answer right here. Okay, let's go back to the notes and finish up. So that was incomplete dominance. Now let's talk about the next thing, which is codominance. So very, very similar to incomplete dominance. The difference is, what does the outcome look like? If you've ever seen a Dalmatian before, or a zebra, or a bee with the red and black stripes, there's a lot of examples in nature where it's not one or the other, it's both together. So in incomplete dominance, there was a third new option, red, white, and pink. If it was black and white, it would be black, white, and gray. In codominance, co means together. So they're both, like if I say cooperate, it means work together, right? Codominance, they're going to be together. So in this scenario, it's exactly the same way we do an incomplete dominance problem. But that third option, that instead of it being black, white, and gray, that third option would be black, white, and then black and white stripes, because co means together. So in the third option, in that middle heterozygous genotype, that is now going to give you a combination of the other two, where the other two phenotypes are still there, they're just together. And you can think of a lot of examples in nature where you've seen this. Anywhere you've seen two different colors combined together in something, that is an example of codominance. We're going to talk about blood types in a little bit. That's going to be our next section, and that is another example of codominance. So it's the same rules as incomplete dominance, but now both phenotypes in that middle option, they're going to appear separately together. Now, separately together sounds strange, but they're going to be there individually, but they're going to be combined together like black and white stripes. So if you look here, black feathers would be big B, white feathers would be big W, and then black and white spotted feathers would be big W, big B. Now, if this was an incomplete dominance problem, big B, BW would not be black and white spotted feathers. It would be some new color in between the other two. So gray would probably be the option there. So let's try to do a problem. I'm actually going to go over to our other board over here so I can do it with you. Okay, so let's take a look here. We have two fuzzy bunnies in class, and one has black and white fur, and the other is pure white. What are the genotypes of both rabbits? Well, we just talked about that, right? So black and white would be this heterozygous option. So the example here, it gave you the B first, so we're going to go with B first. So BW. And then white would be WW. Now, if it told you that the parent had black fur, it would be BB, right? So it's exactly the same as before, the incomplete dominance problem up to this point, right? So I want to know, what are the phenotypes of the offspring if these two rabbits mated with each other? So I take the black and white rabbit and I put it on the top. I take the white rabbit and I put it on the side. Now again, remember, it doesn't matter. I could have done that the other way. I could have put the black and white one down over here, and I could have put the white one up here. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get the same results. So let's fill in our Punnett square. So we got our B over here and our B over here. For this one, we have our W over here and our W over here for this one here. And now we're going to come horizontally, and we have our W and our W, and then finally our W and our W. So we've completed our Punnett square. And this looks a lot like the question we just did, but now remember, instead of it being that third new option, the difference is that we have a combination of the other two phenotypes. So the genotypic ratio, are there any big B, big Bs? The answer to that, if you look up at the Punnett square, is no. So that's 0. BW, 1, 2. And WW, 1, 2. Now our phenotypic ratio, just like before, now we have a third option. In our complete dominance problems, it was just two options, dominant versus recessive, but now we have a third option because neither one is dominant to the other. So black, we have 0 black because there's no big B, big Bs. Black and white, we have 1, 2. And white, we have 1, 2. So the answer to this question is, what would the phenotypes of the offspring of these rabbits be if they mated? The answer would be, you would have a 50-50 chance of having black and white versus white. So I could have asked this a different way. I could have said, what's the percentage chance of having a white rabbit if these two rabbits mated? The answer would be 50%. Okay, that is incomplete dominance and codominance. Hopefully you guys got it. And again, if you have any questions, please email me.